In this episode, I'm going to give you 9 ideas to make you more creative and your photographs unique. Stay tuned.
You're watching Tog Chat Live, the only live show dedicated to the hows and whys behind creating consistently great photographs. Here's your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey, gang, welcome to episode number 227 of Talk Chat Live. Like the intro said, this is the only live show that deals with the hows and whys behind making consistently great photographs. And for the next 60 minutes, that is my focus to help you improve your photography. Already, we have photographers checking in here from all over the world. So please join the party. Be sure, check in, leave a comment in the chat. Let me know that you're here and where you are located. It's always so cool to see so many people from so many different countries tuning in to chat about their love of photography. I've got Gabe here from down in Miami, Eric in New Jersey, Patrick all the way in Paris, Robert in Mexico. We've got Lynn in New York. Let's see here. LGT Lawrence is here from Rugby, England. And I always thought that was a game, you know? Let's see here. Who else I got? I got Joe from Michigan, but he's in Georgia. I got Kirsten in Northern Ireland and Mitch in Ireland. And we've got Misha in Switzerland and Ken in Cheshire in the UK, Scott in Arizona. How cool is that, right? That we can get together all around the world and talk about photography. And here we are. It is Thanksgiving Eve in the United States. Regardless of where you are, I hope that you're healthy, still wearing a mask, practicing your social distancing, and of course, finding time to pick up those cameras because there's no better way to learn photography than to shoot. Okay, a quick favor, please. You see that thumbs up down there, right? Click it for me. I'm going to work really hard to help you with your photography in the next 60 minutes. And honestly, it would help more people find my channel and find Talk Chat if you do me a solid and just hit that thumbs up. And while you're looking down there, feel free to go ahead and hit that share button that's there, right? Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Or you can share the link, tog.chat/live. I just dropped it in the chat window for you. Twitter, Facebook, they are the fastest way to go ahead and get the word out. And hey, look, if any of you are members of any photography clubs or groups, please let them know about Talk Chat. Don't keep all this good stuff to yourself, right? All right, gang. Look, I know it's fun to chat, but I am going to ask you after you check in, please save the chat for questions so that you don't miss anything important and to help me out so that I don't miss any of your questions and all the chat noise. And also, just a quick reminder, this is something that's a little bit new. Talk Chat is now available for download as a podcast every week. I just shared the link in the chat for you, and it's in the show notes below. So if you can't stay for the whole show tonight, or if you like to listen while commuting or running or editing and retouching, there you go. The show is available on iTunes, Google, Spotify, Amazon, and all of the major podcast platforms. And I post the podcast about an hour after the end of the live show each week. And if your podcast platform allows for reviews, please take a second and leave a review. And then I'll tell you what, share that review with me on social media. Make sure you tag me, and I'll send you a little thank you. Now, tonight's topic. For any of you who don't think that you are very creative, or if you struggle coming up with ideas, before I dig in, start posting your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them all in the next 60 minutes. But one of the questions that I hear frequently from photographers is, where do you come up with your ideas? Now, that question, it's usually followed by one of those statements like, I'm just not that creative. Or often, I guess I'm not that creative. Or my personal favorite, I just don't know how to find new ideas. Look, if you're a photographer who thinks like this, I have some bad news for you. If you think you aren't creative, you aren't creative. There, I said it, and I mean it. Oh, I know some of you are wondering what happened to that supportive and nurturing Joe. He's still here, and I am being supportive and I am nurturing, but sometimes that means giving a swift kick in the butt, right? Look, the fact is that thinking you are not creative or not good at coming up with new ideas, it's just lazy. And more importantly, it is a self fulfilling prophecy. You see, so many people think that creative folks are just born creative and that they don't have to work at it. And then these people give up because they figure since they weren't born with the creative gene, well, then there's no point in trying to be creative, is there? Thinking that you're not creative, it's just an excuse for not trying. There are 3 simple facts that I can share with you about creativity. Facts. Number 1, every human being is creative. That's a fact. Number 2, every human being can become more creative because creativity is a habit or a skill that can be practiced and it can be developed. Fact number 3, different people are creative and use creativity in different ways. That's part of what makes them creative. They are not zombies. They choose not to follow the crowd. Now, there are many more things that I could dig into to support my argument, but we have a lot of things to cover in tonight's show. So let me just share quickly 2 things with you, and then I'll give you my list of the 9 creative ideas to help you be more creative. So the first item is that next Thursday, that's December 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time in the US, I'm going to be doing a live stream on the Get Olympus Facebook page. The topic will be creative ideas for holiday portraits. I have a link to the Get Olympus page in the show notes. So I hope to see you there. Second item is a presentation that I do called Understanding Creativity to Improve Your Photography. This presentation is free, and it will give you a lot more detail about the science behind creativity and how you can work to improve your creative skills. The next live presentation will be on January 12th. That's after the holidays, but there is a link to sign up in the show notes. Okay, my 9 ideas or recommendations to make you more creative and to make your photographs more unique. Number 1, stop thinking you aren't creative. Start realizing you are creative, but you're going to need to work at it. This is probably the most important tip of any tip about improving your creativity. That's because being creative, even if you are one of those seemingly gifted people, being creative is a mindset. It's a discipline. Look, you could be the most gifted person in the world, and if you don't put that gift to use, you will not be a very creative person. Number 2, stop being a zombie and following the crowd. This one's going to irritate a few people, and I'm glad. There are thousands of YouTube videos and as many thousands of TikTok video clips and Instagram posts with photographers overpowering the sun with high-speed sync while their subject does a poor impersonation of a fashion model posing on train tracks, or those pictures using colored smoke bombs, or the pictures having a sexy girl posed with angel wings, or how about covering up a half-naked woman in gold foil, or putting that same naked woman in a bathtub full of milk or flowers? And that list goes on. You know it does. How many times do we see awful versions of those pictures? And for that matter, how many of you actually know where the idea came from in the first place? When it comes to photography, you need to understand that visual trends, those things that I just mentioned, visual trends are not good. They are boring. They are copies. Just like a Xerox, a copy is never as good as the original. Period. Copying a trend does not make you look good. It never makes you look good. In fact, it actually makes you look lazy, and it definitely makes you look not creative or original. If you follow me, you know that if something is a trend, no matter how cool I may think it is, I'm going to go as far in the opposite direction as possible. Heck, even if my work sucks, I want to suck on my own terms, not as a cheap copy of something that somebody else already did. Tip number 3, put your camera down. Yes, the guy who constantly tells you to practice is telling you to put the camera down and take a walk or watch some great visual movies or television series like The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. Gotta see that game. Look at images taken by photographers 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, heck, even 70 or more years ago. Surround yourself with creativity. I am not suggesting that you do these things to look for ideas. I'm suggesting that you do it to teach yourself to be aware. To be aware that great ideas are all around you, all day, every day. But you have to learn to connect the dots. Ansel Adams, you all know who Ansel Adams is, I hope. If you don't, shame on you. Ansel Adams routinely took hikes through Yosemite and other national parks without his camera. The purpose of those hikes, it was to find great locations and ideas. What he did take was a notebook and a pencil and a number 90 yellow filter. In the black and white film days, a number 90 Ratten filter, that's WRATTEN, Ratten filter, would darken the blue sky and it would make the clouds stand out in black and white photos. Really good contrast. If you wanted an almost black sky and bright white clouds, you would use a number 25 red filter. Now, in addition to the notebook, the pencil, and the filters, Adams would also take a piece of mat board with a cutout to reference the film format that he intended to shoot in. 4x5, which of course also worked for 8x10, or 5x7, which of course is more of a rectangle. He would take copious notes about interesting locations and the time of day for great light. And then he would go back with a camera when he had the best weather and the best sky to make the image that he imagined. In order to be more creative, you have to learn to see. See the details of things around you every day. And that's not exactly easy. As humans, the more experiences that we have and the more things that we see in life, we simply begin to take things for granted and we pay less attention. So it's this lazy human habit that we all have that makes it harder to be creative. So to help achieve this, we have step number 4. Learn to find the beauty in everything. Now, this is also a mindset, right? Just because you don't immediately see something as beautiful, that doesn't mean that it isn't. It just means that you aren't seeing the beauty. Sometimes we have to look for it. We always enjoy photographing things that we find to be beautiful, personally. An incredible landscape, an intense, fiery red sunset, or a gorgeous young woman. When we see and we appreciate the beauty in a subject, we find it easier to photograph it and to be creative with it. The more you learn to find beauty around you, the more ideas that beauty will inspire. And that brings me to number 5 on my list. Never stop learning. Now, I'm not talking about just photography here, but about life, the world around us, anything, everything. I'm a news junkie. Real news, not fake news. I'm a science geek and a computer nerd. I'm fascinated by psychology and what makes people tick. And I'm all of these things not because of photography, but because of me, because learning is fun. I also always assume that I am not the smartest person in the room, regardless of what I know. And I assume that there is much that I have yet to learn. Every new piece of information that I add to my brain becomes a dot that I might connect to another dot, which is another piece of information that sparks a new idea. Idea number 6. Take all of that information that you digest and mix things up. Many of my best ideas come from combining parts of 2 or 3 completely different ideas. It's a reality in the world in general. School tends to kill creativity. Most questions in school have an answer that is either wrong or right, and it gets you an A or an F. And unfortunately, much of the learning that we do in school, it's based on memorization instead of true understanding. And sadly, this is where rules come from. Screw the rules. Seriously, for me, if the rule says that I can't or I shouldn't, then that is the perfect reason for me to break the rule and find a way to do it that proves that rule is pointless. By doing just that one thing alone, I am able to make my work look different and as a result, look more creative. When I learned about color, I was always taught about colors that should never be put together, combined, like red and purple, or pink and green, or gray and brown. And, I checked today, I Googled. There are tons of articles on the internet that tell you never use those color combinations. Clearly, the people that write these articles are not very creative, and they just love rules and regurgitating them because they've clearly never watched cable TV series like The Queen's Gambit or The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. 2 shows, by the way, that use color combinations routinely in visually stunning ways. Number 7, don't be afraid to reuse ideas. Frequently, when you see me post an image, I've shot that same concept or part of that concept before. And ultimately, I wasn't happy with the outcome. Or I was happy with it, but I still thought that I might be able to improve on it somehow. Now, it could be for any number of reasons, but it means that I liked the idea or part of the idea, so I reused it in a later shot. Now, please, this is not permission to do the same things over and over again. That would definitely be boring and not creative. I'm just talking about a practical use of ideas that are both old and new. For me, if there's going to be any copying in my photographs, it will be my own work that's going to be copied. Next up, number 8. Remember your why. You've probably heard me say this before. Why? Honestly, it's the greatest question ever. When answered in this context, it yields the most information and insight and clarity. When you ask why you picked up a camera in the first place, that answer helps to hold you accountable to your photography. I'm pretty sure that none of you that are listening, picked up your first camera so that you could copy other people's pictures or ideas. If I'm right, do a little soul searching and ask yourself why you started copying other people's pictures. And see if that doesn't lead you right to the things that I said in this podcast. Now, number 9, have fun, but put in the work. Just make sure that you have fun while you're putting in the work. Also, accept that failure is part of the process. In fact, embrace failure because there are great lessons to be learned here. And one bonus tip. which is actually about 6 bonus tips combined into one. You actually don't need this checklist if you simply remember to stop thinking that you aren't creative, and then you go and you pick up your camera and you shoot and fail and shoot more and fail more, and remember why you picked up the camera in the first place. Along the way, enjoy yourself. Have faith in yourself. Think for yourself. Stop comparing yourself with others, and you'll be surprised at what you will create. I promise. Thanks for listening. I hope that you found this helpful. But now, before we move on, I want to share a little fun that I had today. As I was writing my script for tonight, I asked the members of my Facebook group if there were any overdone photography trends that I overlooked in my list that I gave you. Boy, did they deliver. Not only did they deliver, the list was just too good not to share. So remember, I started my list at the beginning of this talk with photographers overpowering the sun with high-speed sync, while their subject does a poor impersonation of a fashion model posing on train tracks, or using colored smoke bombs, or having a sexy girl pose with angel wings, or covering a half-naked woman in gold foil, or that same naked woman in a bathtub full of milk or flowers. Well, the folks in my group added to my list of overdone trends, which are usually done poorly. And this is not even their entire list. This is everything I was able to copy before I came on the air. So here we go. Body painting a model as a superhero. A hot girl posed on the hood of a sports car. Instagram skin, you know, the heavy orange and teal filter stuff. Heck, Instagram filter anything. Also on Instagram, the pretty girl leading the photographer by the hand photos done by every travel influencer in the world. Powder and flower photography. Fairy lights. Skin being processed with a plastic texture, probably because the photographer just purchased the frequency separation action. Steel wool being spun for time exposures. Overdone HDR on every kind of image imaginable. For the photographers who have heeded the warnings about train tracks, now they have the model laid down in the middle of the road instead, because what could possibly go wrong there? And the list goes on. Oh, yeah, of course, there's like heart hands, spot color, my favorite. I mean, that's so 2002. And folks, I'm sorry, but it hasn't been long enough for that trend to become retro yet. Thank God. Living room furniture in the middle of a field. A pretty girl in an abandoned, run-down, definitely not safe building. How about a naked model wrapped in yellow caution tape? Or the more current version is the naked model wearing an outfit made from black electrical tape. I'm sure that you could help me add to this list. Go ahead, be sure to put any trends that I missed in the comments. And those are my Tog thoughts and tips for this week. Now, I am pleased to say that there is nothing of any real consequence in photography news this week. Unless, of course, you are independently wealthy and you want a camera with 400 megapixels via pixel shift. And of course, then make sure that you buy yourself a new Mac Pro computer to go with that Fuji camera. Otherwise, you won't be able to process the files. But seriously, I do want to share some gear porn with you. Well, it's not X-rated, but it is absolutely hardcore porn. But it is educational. I mean, I'm talking about the hows and whys kind of educational porn. All right. Now that I have probably managed to get my podcast flagged, okay, I am talking about a video called One Shot. Come on, get your minds out of the gutter, folks. It's called One Shot Photographing the Olympic Games. I have a link to it in the show notes. I will tell you in advance, it is 27 minutes long, so hopefully you'll wait until I'm done my show to watch it. But if you watch me or my videos, I want you to promise me that you will watch this video. It features multiple award-winning photographers, including Mr. David Burnett, who was a guest here on TalkChat earlier this year. It was shot during the Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro that took place in 2016. This short documentary gives you an incredible behind the scenes look at how the iconic images that we see from the Olympic Games come to be. Now, seriously, regardless of your favorite genre of photography, it doesn't matter what it is. There is a tremendous amount to be learned in this video about preparation and understanding your subject. So don't miss it. Now, I would encourage you to hide your credit cards for at least 7 days after you watch this video. If you don't, I cannot be held responsible. I have warned you. All right. So how can I help you with your photography tonight? You're here. There must be something that you want to do to improve your photography. So I do have a few questions that came in earlier from my Facebook groups. And by the way, if you haven't joined the groups yet, remember, it doesn't cost anything, right? The links are in the show notes. I'll also drop them into the chat here. There you have them. So let me take those few questions real quick first. And then I see we've got a couple really good questions in here, but there's room for more, gang. So go ahead and get your questions in there. All right. This first one comes in from Jim Kearns, and he asks, what is the most important non-photography skill that a new photographer needs in terms of business sense? Is it learning your cost of doing business, or maybe marketing, sales, people skills? Gosh, Jim, honestly, all of the above. It is not good enough. And you may have heard me tell some of my stories over time here. It is not good enough to just be great with a camera if you want to pay your bills with a camera. And believe me, in the course of my career, I have made pretty much every business mistake imaginable. It is really, really important to understand your cost of doing business. It is really, really important to properly understand how to do your books, handle your taxes, how to do marketing. Obviously, people skills is incredibly important. And even if you want to shoot landscapes, if you want to make money shooting those landscapes, you better develop people skills. What I generally recommend to people, Jim, is yes, you can learn a lot online. If you are a diligent student, meaning you are a person that can, look at material online and use some discerning thought processes to determine, is there any real value to this material, or is this just blah, 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 whatever, okay, or stuff that's just been regurgitated a million times over, and take something away from that, then great. If not, what I recommend to people is take a business basic, a basic business class and a basic marketing class. Here in the United States, as an example, you can do both of those things very inexpensively at a local community college. You only need the basics. The basics give you enough of a foundation to be able to begin your business and get started with a business plan and get started with the right idea of how to structure your business and how to market it. But that foundation that they're giving you also sets you up with an understanding so that as marketing trends change, as business trends change, you're going to find it much easier to keep up because you have that foundational education behind it. So for anyone that's looking to make money as a photographer, do not underestimate the value of a basic business class and a basic marketing class. Okay. All right. The next question I have here is from Mike Hardy, to build on last week's question. So Mike, last week, if you folks were here, he had some questions about getting really harsh light when he was using gels. And in part, that's because he was just putting his gels over the end of a 7-inch reflector on the strobe. So it wasn't really diffusing the gels, right? So this week he's asking, is it worth buying a diffusion filter to further soften the look of the gelled strobes? Mike, when we say, is it worth it? It really depends on what your expectations are for that diffusion filter. A diffusion filter is going to sit very close to your light source, especially if you're planning on using it on the end of that 7-inch reflector that we talked about last week. So the diffusion filter, given that it's a thin piece of usually acetate type material, yes, it will spread the light a little bit more aggressively than just the reflector. And by the way, it's that spread that creates the diffusion, whether you're using a softbox, an umbrella, whatever. Okay. So it will spread the light more aggressively than just the reflector, but it's not going to spread the light and soften the light or diffuse the light nearly as much as an umbrella or a softbox will do. Honestly, it sounds to me from the questions you're asking me, the concerns you have, and kind of the issues you've had, Mike, your best bet without breaking the bank in terms of being able to soften your lighting and gain a little bit more control would simply be to go ahead and purchase an inexpensive umbrella. And honestly, the umbrella that I would recommend that you look up, in fact, here, let me see if I can find this for you guys really quick here. I'm going to check on Amazon really fast and I'll share the link if I can find it. Um, it's actually made by Westcott, which if you guys follow me, you know Westcott's a company that I'm sometimes a little bit hard on because of the price of their products. But this particular umbrella, I got to tell you, the price is awesome. And I found it. Let me just get the URL here. There we go. So it's a long URL. I'm going to stick this in the chat window. This is a 45-inch optical translucent umbrella that is white, and it is only $21.90 on Amazon. So not to spend your money for you, Mike, or anybody else that's here, but if you can afford cameras and lenses and gels, you can afford a $21 umbrella. What you can do then, Mike, is you can take those gels that you have, continue to put them, if you want the color, continue to put them over that 7-inch reflector that you have, but shoot that through that white umbrella, and you are going to have much softer light to work with. Okay? All right. Next question that I have here is from Joe. How do I best do a portrait with Christmas tree lights in the background if I'm using a strobe? So that's actually a great question for this time of the year. So part of the challenge with that is that your strobe is going to be much, much brighter than the Christmas tree lights, right? So there's a couple things that you need to kind of factor in there. Depending on space, which that's always the wild card that makes things a challenge, right? But depending on space, if at all possible, try to get as much separation or distance between your subject and the Christmas tree. That space or that distance is important because the more distance you get, you can take advantage of those famous 3 words, the inverse square law. And by putting your light source then relatively close to your subject, that causes the light from the strobe to fall off very rapidly, meaning it's not going to have as much impact on the background. Because if you light up the Christmas tree with your strobe, you're also taking all the richness of color out of the Christmas tree. Now, that only solves part of the problem, Joe, right? That has solved the problem of not just making the Christmas tree look kind of bland color-wise, but what it hasn't solved is the fact that the Christmas tree lights are nowhere near as bright as your flash. So ideally, what you're going to want to do is try to create a scenario where you are going to use a slower shutter speed than what you normally would with flash. Remember, with flash, most of the time, we're going to go ahead and set our cameras at the fastest speed that they will sync at if we're shooting portraits. So that's going to be like, depending on your camera and your model, 1/160th, 1/200th, 1/250th of a second. No high-speed sync stuff here, gang, okay? So those shutter speeds are probably going to be too bright for you to be able to record those Christmas lights. So you're going to need to be able to go to a slower shutter speed. So the way you want to do the portrait is, number one, you want to turn the power down nice and low on your flash and get it, and whatever modifier you have it in, closer to your subject. You are going to shoot with a little less depth of field because your goal is going to be to get your lens opened up quite a bit and then also work at a slightly slower shutter speed. One last piece that's important now that I've told you that, you want to try and have the room that you are shooting in as dim as possible. If there's way too much bright ambient light, none of what I've just recommended to you is going to work. It's actually going to fall flat on its face because when you open up that lens and go to a slower shutter speed, you're going to wind up overexposing the background and the subject for that matter, right? So it's a bit of a balancing act, Joe. But again, um, you want to try and create separation from the subject in the background and the tree, right? You want to have a dimly lit room, and then you want to power down the power of your strobe so that you're shooting at as wide an aperture as you can still shoot at with the strobe. You know, if you're shooting like f4, f5.6 even, that's fine. But ideally, f4, f2.8 is going to be a little bit better. And then your shutter speed at that point is going to become the variable. And if you work at an ISO of, let's say, 200, in most cases with a Christmas tree, you should be able to get away with hand holding that shot at maybe a 30th or a 60th of a second. If you're not super stable at those shutter speeds, use a monopod, use a tripod. That's absolutely fine. That's how I would recommend that you approach that. Okay. All right. From Lane. What do you consider, Joe, when choosing to take portraits outside? Some people are asking to have pictures taken outside for better social distancing. That's a whole nother issue, but we'll deal with that. At this time of year, do you look more for colors, shapes, maybe some water areas, buildings, or structures? Do you try to keep the shot tight or show some background with the shot? This could be with one person or up to a family of four in the scenarios that Lane is dealing with. So there's a couple things to unpack there, Lane. I know that not everybody will agree with this. So since I'm asking or answering the question, I'm going to give you my opinion. It's just an opinion. We can agree to disagree and we can move on. And this is not just for Lane, but this is for many of you. I am of the mindset, and I'm probably in a minority, but I am of the mindset right now, given everything that is happening with the pandemic that we are dealing with, there is nothing about portraits or family portraits that are essential or important. They're just not. So the whole social distancing excuse is baloney because the fact of the matter is, once people get together, we're people. We forget about social distancing. We forget about being as careful as we should be. So I'm not, going to get up in a soapbox with that, but it's my opinion. Photography uh, uh, of portraits and things like that is completely non-essential at this point. It's not important. I would rather live through this pandemic and be able to enjoy many, many years to come than to get sick and die, right? So that being said, let's just talk about this in the context of a location portrait, especially in a time of year where, especially like here in the Northeast where I am, you are starting to lose all of the color. The trees don't have leaves. Things are kind of getting very bland. So really what the challenge comes down to, Lane, is that for any outdoor photo, and honestly, any time of year, you have to be very careful about the idea of what is the picture really for and about. And what I mean is this. If you are going to take a portrait of someone or family outside, and your first thought is, oh my gosh, there's this really cool watermill that's a couple miles away, and it's got one of those big turning wheels and this amazing building and all that. Okay, that's fine. But then when you get there, the mistake that so many photographers make is, what are you really photographing? Are you photographing the watermill? Are you photographing the people? Are you photographing the people in front of the watermill? And if you're photographing the people in front of the watermill, I would ask you, why are you doing that? They wanted a portrait. So the way to use a location to enhance a portrait is not to be able to say, oh, cool, look at that building. I mean, there are some like wedding photographers that do that. Sal Sincata is known for that. Like, travels the world, finds these amazing like European castles, okay, and waits for deep, dark, brooding skies, and you have this incredible architectural image. And oh, look, down there at the bottom, there's a bride and groom, right? That's cool. I mean, that's his thing, and he makes a lot of money doing it. Don't get me wrong, right? But if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a portrait," you need to be careful about how much emphasis you're putting on that background in terms of being able to see what it is or where it is. So I tend to think of backgrounds more in the sense, and I will tell you honestly, I don't do portraits that way, period. But certainly for maybe a high school senior portrait photographer, somebody like that, there would be reasons to do images where you are able to identify a certain locale. We all see the senior portraits where like the football players and the cheerleaders, they're photographed the in the football stadium, that kind of a thing, right? Regardless of which way you go, you want to make sure that that background is not distracting. So you're looking for details in the background that don't belong. You're looking for details in the background that are busy. You are looking, especially this time of year, even you're looking at the ground. Is the ground muddy? Is there all kind of leaves all around the ground? And if there's enough leaves, then it looks really cool. If there's just spotty leaves, they can actually be distracting and just look sloppy and bland, right? So I guess, Lane, that's a long way of saying really nothing changes because it's the fall. It's simply a matter of, selecting really interesting backgrounds and being careful about how much emphasis you give them in the shot. Next week's Talk Chat, I have a guest coming on. I haven't done a guest in a while. This guy who's been here before, his name is Will Cadena. Will, who is an awesome shooter, he's a Westcott pro. He is a guy that shoots almost every image that he does. Tons of portraits and weddings. Almost every image he shoots at f11 and f16. And with wide angles. Tons of depth of field. So he is obviously a master at finding great backgrounds because he's got so much depth of field, it's going to be in focus. So it better look good, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that next week. So something for you guys to look forward to, okay? From David. David says, I will be doing a portrait shoot with a female model who has very dark skin. Any pointers regarding exposure and lighting? I've seen suggestions to overexpose dark skin tones. This is an indoor shoot. I have white, black, and gray backdrops available. So, David, let's start at the end of that and work backwards. Black, white, and gray backdrops available. That depends on several factors. The first would be, why are you shooting this portrait? What is the point behind it? If you're doing it for a subject who has a specific need, well, that need is going to somewhat dictate the background, right? If you are just looking for creative options, any one of those three could provide you tons of creative options. The gray, of course, you could add color to it. You can turn it into lots of different things, but it really depends on what kind of a look. So please don't let myself or anyone else tell you use this color or use that color if you're doing it for creative purposes, because that's just my opinion of what I would do. Be your own photographer, right? Now, with regards to really dark skin, and should you overexpose darker skin tones? No, be careful. In part, it depends on what that subject is wearing, right? So if you have a very dark skinned model and that model is wearing something bright white, you better be really careful about overexposing that. And I'm curious how you're determining the idea that it's overexposed. What was the right exposure in the first place? It might be a good idea for you to attend one of my upcoming online presentations. In fact, it's a completely free one. I'm going to find the date here for you for when it comes up next. This is indeed probably after you have your session scheduled. But the topic of this talk is called exposure. What is correct exposure? I've added the link in the chat window, and for the folks listening to the podcast, I'll add it in the show notes. The idea of correct exposure is not what a light meter says. That's a guide. That's a guideline. Correct exposure is the exposure that's going to make your subject's skin tones look their best, and the exposure that's going to make sure that you're not blowing out the colors of their outfits, especially like if they're wearing white. So the easy solution is try to discourage them from wearing white. But even if they do, this is where knowledge of lighting comes into play. The biggest mistake that I find photographers making when they are working with really dark skinned subjects is they put their lights too close to the subject. And then as a result, they feel they need to lighten the image to take care of the skin, the dark skin. But because of that, then everything else in the image starts to become overexposed. The solution, back your lights up. Back your lights up. Go to a slightly bigger modifier if you need to soften the light. That's fine. But by backing the light up, it's going to be a lot easier for you to find a nice, subtle balance between the really bright, whites or lighter colors, and then, of course, the dark skin. But I would actually discourage you from overexposing for the sake of the dark skin, because that overexposure has an impact on everything in your scene, not just your subject's skin. So keep that in mind. Okay. All right. Let's see here. I think I am ready to dive into the chat. So let's scroll back here to the beginning and see what we got for questions. You guys, good stuff tonight, gang. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it when you folks come in with questions that are well thought out, that we can really have a good discussion about. Okay. So let's see here. Here's all the hellos. And I am scrolling on down. There it is. From Alexander David. Woo, that's a little big on the screen, isn't it? Let's do that. Hello, Joe. I wanted to ask you if you find yourself, when drafting your own ideas, having the trend to kind of check it to see if it's been done. The line behind wanting to try it and not being so mainstream. Alexander, yeah, kind of, sort of. It depends. So, let me divide the answer into two halves. When I am simply taking pictures, I don't do any checking to see if it's been done before or not. Full disclosure, please open your minds. I'm not saying this to be arrogant. I'm being honest, and I actually recommend it. I do, sincerely. I don't look at a lot of other photographers' photography. I find it boring to do that. Now, please don't hate me. I'm not saying that, oh, like I'm better. No. Honestly, sometimes it can be depressing because I'm not better, right? What I mean is I didn't take the pictures. I didn't have that experience. So it actually doesn't interest me because I'm not in photography, or I should say, I'm into photography for the experience. It's the access to people and the ability to create with them. It's the doing that I like. So I don't look at a lot of other photographs when it comes to ideas for my own photographs. And I definitely don't look to see, well, has it been done or whatever. I don't want to be influenced by that. If I've got an idea, I'm going to flesh out that idea and I'm going to give it my spin. I actually mentioned, I believe it was last week or the week before. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one, but the topic that I did for Talk Chat, literally as I was writing the topic, when I write articles or I write my tutorials, I do go and do some research just to make sure that the things that I'm putting down and the things that I'm wanting to encourage people, that I'm not overlooking something of importance, especially based on the science behind it. I want to make sure that the knowledge and the suggestions that I'm passing along are sound. I had a scenario just a couple of weeks ago where I found that the topic that I was doing had been in a video by Ted Forbes, who does the Art of Photography channel, like a week before I was writing about it. I was like, oh, crap. And then I decided, no, merge ahead, do it, but make sure that you're doing your own thing. So I didn't watch his video. To this day, I have not watched his video. I saw that he had a video, and the title of the video was like the same topic. But I did not watch his video because I did not want to be influenced by it. And I'm sure his video probably has some really good information in it because I have respect for Ted Forbes. But I'm also confident, without even watching all of his video, that it's also different. Because, of course, we both have completely different perspectives. And that doesn't make either one of us right. It just makes them different. So, yeah, I guess the short answer there also, Alexander, is I don't look over my shoulder worrying, has it been done before? I simply go forward with my ideas and I give them my spin. As I mentioned before, I'm gonna pass or fail on my own merits. So I'm not really that worried about what other people have done in that regard. But if I'm aware that it's been done, you can bet your life I'm going in another direction all the time. I mean, there are plenty of trends that come and go that I would love to try. Like, oh my God, I think that's so cool. But the fact that so many other people have done it, I just won't. I'm the same way with my subjects. There are some models locally here in Allentown, Pennsylvania that I see pictures of, and it's like, oh God, I would just love to photograph that girl. But I won't, because that girl is one of these girls that is out doing 6 photo shoots a week, and she's been photographed by every photographer and their brother in a 5-state radius, and good for her. She's loving life and living her life, and she should. But that's the perfect reason for me not to photograph her. So, all right, next up here, Sergio. I always remember your phrase, forget the idea that each photo has to be epic, trying to shoot and fail, improving from failure to failure. Yeah, I mean, we all make that mistake. It's important to understand that, Sergio, for all of you. A lot of these topics that I've been talking about in TogShot the last several weeks, we all make those mistakes. The things that I'm telling you about tonight are honestly from my own experience. I chased trends way back when. I did those things and realized that it was not productive, realized that it was not helping me. It wasn't helping me grow. It was because it wasn't challenging me. It wasn't helping me stand out because I was just another one in the group, right? So yeah, we learn as we go. So Sergio, I'm glad that you remember that. Donald Myers, what are your thoughts on sky replacement? I think in some cases it is a breach of integrity. Well, so, so that's interesting, Donald, that you say that. You're not wrong. But see, I take a different perspective. So obviously, most of you know, and even based on the video that I shared with you from the Olympics tonight, there's a soft spot in my heart for photojournalism. That's where I got my start in photography many decades ago. However, those days are long gone. And while I still admire photojournalists and I indeed miss that kind of work, I'm on a creative side of things right now. So using the word integrity is like crap for me. I'm not saying you're wrong, Donald, not at all. I'm just saying the idea of, integrity because it's fake, integrity because it wasn't really there, integrity because it was photoshopped. I don't care. I'm an artist. And I'm not using that as an easy excuse. I'm just saying I'm creating things. My work is not based in reality. I mean, here, look at. There's nothing real about a girl with blue balls floating around her head, right? I mean, so my work is not based in reality. So that being said, that part's a personal choice, and I respect those that want integrity in their images. Absolutely. With regards to what are my thoughts on sky replacement, I think it is one of several incredibly amazing advancements that are happening in the photography world today. But that's B-U-T, not two T's. But just like anything else that's new, just like anything else that's different and kind of exciting, people are going to use it, abuse it. And right now, yeah, it's being abused. So what are we seeing right now? Right now, we're seeing lots and lots and lots of pictures show up with ridiculously fake skies that don't match the picture. And we're seeing lots and lots and lots of pictures show up that have the same sky as like 1,000 other pictures that were posted right before it. That's a given. Because just like our topic tonight, just like we discussed, unfortunately, there are lazy photographers. There are photographers that have convinced themselves that they are not creative, and this is the only way to be creative and do good photography. There are photographers that are lazy, too lazy, to put in the effort like Ansel Adams did and figure out what is the best time to shoot, when is the light going to be best, which, by the way, you can do with a phone app now, right? But they're still too lazy. So, yeah, they'll fix it in post. Their pictures, Don, they just fall into the mix with all the other kind of boring, trendy stuff that's out there. But I am a big believer that these technological advancements that we are getting that are allowing us to essentially reimagine photographs and to create beyond what we're able to actually physically put in front of the camera, I think that's amazing. I think it's absolutely amazing. But just like anything else, it's kind of all good things in moderation, right? It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But that's okay. At least with me, that's okay. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Ajax, I love the color palettes they use in the Queen's Gambit. Yeah, folks. Listen, if you haven't watched the Queen's Gambit on Netflix, I highly recommend it. Strictly for the visuals, like literally. I mean, even if you're not into the storyline or any of that stuff, watch it for the visuals. The visuals are brilliant. Okay, absolutely brilliant. So let's see here. From Rich, the question on genre. What is lifestyle and how is it different from documentary? Whoops. When we get into sorry about that, guys. I knocked over my billboard. When we get into the idea of genres, it's hard to to set really, really hard defining lines between them. And indeed, there's frequently, some overlap. Even like the work that I do, it's a little bit portrait, it's a little bit fashion, it's a little bit beauty, it's a little bit he's on drugs, it's a little bit whatever, right? So generally speaking, documentary has a little bit of a news element. And when I say news, I don't mean like breaking news, ooh, there's a fire, but I mean news in the sense that there is a story that needs to be told, right? There is something happening, good or bad, and something that most people are not even aware of, don't have a realization about. And by documenting it, we are creating an awareness and we are showing it or exposing it to the rest of the world, right? The lifestyle aspect of it tends to be used more in the advertising world. And you notice I said tends to be used because it's not exclusive, but it tends to be used more in the advertising world where it is images that reflect people living happy lives. Like, here's the happy family having a cookout in the backyard. Here's the boy and the girl going out on a nice date for the evening. They tend to be lifestyle images. So, Rich, I hope that helps. Okay. Next up, scrolling on down from Claudio, what is your take on environmental portraits without modifiers? Is it okay to have overexposed sky as long as your subject is properly exposed? So, interestingly, Claudio, and this is kind of, folks, full disclosure, this is kind of one of the things that's interesting about our topic tonight. And I gave you that list of all these overdone trends. I actually had a few people in my Facebook group that complained about blown out skies, like that was a trend. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know it was a trend. But Claudio, I don't mind a blown out sky, provided that it looks good. Now, think that through for a second. What determines if it looks good or not? To me, what determines if it looks good is what is the picture for? What is the picture about? What are you trying to communicate in the picture? And indeed, of course, what is the subject of the picture? If that blown out sky becomes distracting, if that blown out sky interferes with the subject, the intent of the picture, then it's bad. Then it sucks. But a blown out sky can simplify a picture. A blown out sky can bring a certain kind of purity to an image. It all depends on what's in the image and what the context is. So, again, don't let yourself get pigeonholed by rules. In some contexts, I don't like a blown out sky, just like a lot of other people don't like blown out skies. The difference is so many of the people that don't like blown out skies don't like them because some bozo on YouTube said you're not supposed to like them. That's not the reason to not like them. Because I've got plenty of images of blown out skies, and I defy somebody to tell me that the blown out sky is wrong. They can take a hike. So that's how I would approach it if I were you. Okay. Ken Rain, a follow-up to my question last week. How do I convince my wife I need the 150 to 400 millimeter lens? She has pre-ordered one for herself. Well, then, gosh, Ken, see, so Ken's referring to the brand new Olympus, or I should say Mzuiko, 150 to 400 millimeter lens. Ken, obviously, to have two of those in the family, Kirsten, thank you so much for the super chat. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. To have two of those lenses in the family, Ken, I can understand how your wife would be opposed to that and consider that to be just way too much expense. So I think you're going about it completely the wrong way. That would be my recommendation. I think what you're not looking at is how do you let your wife win, but ultimately you win. So there's a couple ways that you could kind of approach that, Ken. Number one is maybe you also go out for much less money and you purchase the 100 to 400 for you, since she won't let you have the 150. With the idea that when you get that lens and she gets hers in January, she's going to realize that even though that 150 to 400 is an amazing lens, it's bigger, it's heavier, it's got more buttons, it's got more things to do. So you can say, honey, here, you take the lighter one, and bingo, you win, right? So you can't say I didn't try to help. Just saying, right? Okay. Um, let's see, from Rich. Let's see, regarding trends, what if there is a trend that interests you that involves a certain skill or technique? Don't you feel it's worth doing if just to go learn and or practice that skill or technique? Oh, Richard, so here, listen close, gang, or you're gonna think that I'm like completely talking out of my butt after everything I said to you tonight. For the purpose of learning, especially for a new photographer, a young photographer that's starting out, I am 1000% for the idea of, oh my God, I love that picture. I've got to learn how to do that picture. I'm going to try and copy it so that I can learn how to do it. I am 1000% on board with that. However, here's where I draw the line. That's something that you do for you. That's something that you do for the purpose of learning. So once you finally copy that picture, when you have achieved that goal, you go ahead and pat yourself on the back. You go ahead and congratulate yourself for learning it. And then you figure out, how can I take this new skill and how can I do it my way? How can I give it my spin? Or yeah, how can I do it better? But you don't take that picture that you've just copied and be slapping yours all over social media like, look at me, look what I did. Because honestly, that's sad. And photographers do it all the time, but it's sad. First of all, you should be paying the person who came up with the idea in the first place for their creative efforts that you stole. Secondly, what are you being all proud of, right? It's part of the learning process. So I'm all for copying it in the sense of using it as a learning tool, but using it as a learning tool doesn't mean that you're going to go post it. That's the difference. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Paul, I teach leaders creativity. If you were to replace photographer with a leader, your message would resonate regarding laziness and trends. Paul, I'm right there with you. I actually do some public speaking for corporate organizations, and I use photography in the context as the example around creativity. But yes, the lessons, most of these lessons that I give you guys in the beginning of Talk Chat, they're life lessons, gang. They're really intended to kind of give you permission, honestly, to give you permission to struggle, to give you permission to not get it right, to give you permission to fail, to give you permission to have ideas that don't exist on YouTube or all over social media. That's really why I do them. It's to encourage you, right? So yeah, I'm with you, Paul. Definitely. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Fannie Mae, any news on buying those shirts here? Not yet. I'm sorry. Probably not going to happen until after COVID. So let's see here. Let's see. Kirsten, Moray, this may be more of a video or live stream question. I want to use my Sony A7 with an 18mm f2.8 lens via the HDMI output. However, I'm having annoyance with Moray interference and she goes on to say, with certain fabrics, especially pantyhose. Can you recommend any ways to minimize this in camera settings or external filters? So Kirsten, the real question is, are you the subject and are you choosing to wear that particular pantyhose? Or is this a scenario where for a client, you're going in and like, that's what's there? If it's a matter of that's what's there, you're kind of stuck with it. I personally am not familiar with any easy ways to get rid of that in video. I'm sorry. I wish I could help you a little bit more there. Certainly, if you're working with a client, even if you're not the one in front of the camera, if you're working with a client where you have the ability to influence what is going to show up that day in terms of outfits and apparel and backgrounds and all those things, then absolutely, those are conversations that you should be having in advance. Always. Excellent photography comes from people who are control freaks. Just does, right? You want to be a control freak. And I promise you, there's a right way and a wrong way to present it, but your clients will always appreciate that attention to, because being a control freak as a photographer, it's about attention to detail. That's what it is, right? So believe me, your clients will appreciate that. Oh, Kirsten, you're the subject? Pick a different pair of pantyhose. I'm sorry. I know that's like blasphemy to tell a woman, no, you can't wear your favorite pair of pantyhose. But yeah, pick a different pair. avoid materials that are going to cause more. That's honestly, that is the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, you're going to be doing all kind of really weird things that are just going to make your shot and your lighting and everything else much more difficult and much more challenging. Just change the outfits. That's really the best way to go. Rich, thank you so much for the super chat. I really, really appreciate it. And Mike, thank you so much for the super chat. I also, again, really, really appreciate it. Okay. Oh, and shocker, I'm running late here. So let's see. I just got one more question. So I'm going to get my last question here from Troy. Is it possible to be a successful portrait photographer without having a proper studio? I don't like using natural light, so I'm forced to lug my gear everywhere. So Troy, first of all, the answer is absolutely it is. Yes. And as I'm saying that, it's killing me because I cannot remember the gentleman's name. Todd, thank you for the super chat so much. 2 or 3 years ago, I did a talk up in Plymouth, Massachusetts for a PPA group up there. And the day that I arrived, so I saw about 2/3 of this gentleman's talk. I arrived on the Friday. The event had already started. I was speaking Saturday. But anyway, this guy was a portrait photographer, and he was an older gentleman. When I say older, meaning he had a good 10 years on me, okay? But still working, still full-time, making really good money. And he was in New England and in the Hamptons, which for those of you that don't know the Hamptons in New England, that's money territory, right? That's where he was located. He worked exclusively in people's homes. And part of what he did, and he did very classic, very traditional kind of portraiture, the hand-painted, muslin backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. And these are portraits that people were going to wind up hanging above a fireplace, literally like above a fireplace. And not only did this guy have a thriving business, but part of the reason he had a thriving business is because he turned that whole thing into an experience. He would go and consult with people in their home before the shoot and help them pick out outfits and help them pick the best spots in their home. And they would map it all out. So he walked out of the house with no cameras, not even on the day of the shoot, before the day of the shoot. He walked out of the house, leaving people with great confidence. This is going to be amazing. Then he would come back and he would do the shoot with all this planning done. He'd know where to set up. He'd know what he'd have to do, everything. And he'd do these shots. And then he would come back. Ken, thank you so much for the super chat. Then he would come back a week or so later with proofs. And when he came back with the proofs, he'd bring a bottle of champagne, a little basket of crackers, some nice little things like that, spread them all out on the table, and he would show people, the proofs and everything and do his sales pitch. So, Troy, is it doable? Yes. Understand that it becomes really, really important. If you really want to bring in the bucks, in a situation like that, you have got to look for ways to create a fun and interesting and valuable experience. And when I say valuable, I mean the perception of valuable experience for your customers. If you do that, absolutely, you do not have to have a studio to work in. Okay. That's it for tonight, gang. First of all, thank you all so much. All the super chats, really, really awesome questions. Please, if you're in the U.S., stay safe. Have a good Thanksgiving. If you're not in the U.S., stay safe. Have a great Thursday, okay? And gang, whatever you do, please remember these words. Thanks for listening to the Todd Chat Photography Podcast. Now go pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.